not just Bryce Underwood, but Michigan is in the hunt for a bunch of different recruits and still in the 2025 cycle. And we've got to talk about more of these names because things are heating up in a big way with a bunch of different prospects. Also, we are going to touch back on a little bit of what happened against Michigan State after all of this impugning of Kalel Mullings' name. Sharon Moore strongly refutes the things that came out of MSU media's mouth. We're going to talk about that on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday and happy Halloween. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. I almost said my name is Isaiah Hole. I don't know why. Still confused. Starting to get a stronger and stronger voice, as I'm sure you're hearing. Still not full strength, but we're getting closer and closer. So, obviously, we all know Michigan is in the hunt for Bryce Underwood. That's feeling closer and closer to not necessarily being a flip, but being a real kind of contention type scenario, I should say. I stand by my 40% note until further notice. But there are other prospects who are out there that Michigan's in good shape for. Some of them are flip targets. It's funny because all this Bryce Underwood stuff has kind of led us to not talk about Shamari Earls, the cornerback that was originally committed to South Carolina and ended up flipping to Georgia over Michigan. And as time goes by, it's looking more and more like Shamari Earls is going to end up being a member of this 2025 class. That's a huge win in and of itself. I mean, he's borderline 5-star status. Probably would be much higher, but Rivals for some reason has him ranked as a 3-star, whereas the other sites, like On3 has him as the number 23 prospect in the country, but still a 4-star. That makes sense. I'm sure they'll give him a 5th star at some point, but he's that type of talent. He's being pitched as being the replacement for Will Johnson. He's being recruited very, very heavily by the staff as well as the current players. And that's a shot over the bow, right? That could be kind of the domino. Now, it's not like Bryce Underwood sitting here looking at Shamari Earls and saying, like, I've got to wait to see what this guy does. But the fact that usually you don't see, Michigan, a school like Michigan or a school like Penn State or any non-Ohio State school stealing away the likes of elite targets committed to SEC schools, that could be part of a paradigm shift, right? So, I mean, that's already big news right at this moment. He came on campus, he was at the game. That's huge news just in and of itself. And I kind of feel like this part of this segment's going to be rendered moot before too long. But then you also have guys like Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, who I've talked to many a time. Every time he goes to Ann Arbor, he's like, that visit was better than the last. That visit was better than anywhere I've been. All that kind of stuff. Every time it starts feeling like he's trending to Michigan, just as quickly it feels like he's trending away. It looks like it's like he's trying to find an excuse to go to Notre Dame and not go to Michigan, but it seems like he still keeps being drawn back into Michigan. Now he's visiting for the second time during the season and like the 5th or 6th time, I think, during the year. He's coming back this week for the Oregon game. So that's huge, especially because he has those teammates. He's got Donovan Jackson and Caden Strayhorn sitting there able to just constantly pitch him on Michigan. And obviously he loves Michigan. Sorry, not to keep scratching the upper bridge of my nose here. But the fact that they keep on coming to campus, I mean, that's big. And he's not making his decision until early signing day. So the more impressions that you can get for him to come onto campus, that is also huge. So that's a big name. I'm just kind of going through my list of guys who, just to kind of expound on some of these that I think absolutely could end up in the class. Another one I'm really curious about and just visited this last week is Bradley Gompers. He's probably a linebacker, but he's a 4-star athlete from the same high school that Cole Sullivan is from. And he's currently committed to Manny Diaz and Duke. So I think that the fact that he made it to campus, it's Michigan over Duke, right? Like you've got like these, you got your high school teammate, same position, already on staff or on campus rather. I think that's like a home run, especially because Michigan needs linebackers. So those are the two linebackers that you hope could and would end up in this class. So that's also really big. Jordan Young just visited Michigan. It does not feel like he'll end up at Michigan. Feels like it's a Clemson NC State battle. But Michigan did get the last say, him coming for his visit right before making his decision on this upcoming Saturday. So that's, I think, a big one. Here's an underrated one I want to talk about for a second. And that's Elijah Dotson. Because here's the thing. Elijah Dotson is very close with Bryce Underwood. He came and visited this last week. Michigan felt like it was where he was going to end up. It felt like interest waned on both ends. I have it on good authority that Elijah is like strongly considering a flip from Pitt to Michigan. And that's evidenced also in the fact that he's visiting Michigan again. How much that can play a role for Bryce, I mean, who knows, right? Because like you always hear guys say like, yeah, we're going to be a package deal. And it sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't. But that would give someone else that could be in the ear. I don't know how much Michigan is necessarily in on the safety from Belleville. I would look at this as like a Michael Dwumfor type scenario. It's like, okay, he's a good player, just like Dwumfor. Dwumfor was a 3-star, by the way. But like you want the good player because it also helps you with the one that you really want above all else, right? Like you see schools do that all the time. Michigan did the same thing with, it took Josh Metellus and Devin Gill to get Devin Bush. Josh Metellus actually, maybe not in a Michigan uniform, but ultimately as an overall football player, the best of all three, right? He's killing it as a pro with the Vikings. So yeah, I would say yes to that. If you can convince him to flip, then you take that commitment. I just want to mention a few more names and we'll get to the MSU thing. I have my eye on Quante Gillians, the Syracuse commit. He was in town this last week, as was Benny Patterson, the Cincinnati commit, both defensive tackles. They also hosted, and I haven't heard yet much about him, but Joseph Mbachu, he was a Florida commit. He's a 4-star. He's a highly rated 4-star. He goes to Grayson High School in the state of Georgia. That's one of those powerhouse high schools. Michigan's gotten a few guys here and there from Grayson, but generally you think like Grayson, they're going to go to Georgia usually. But he is being courted by Georgia, USC, all of those things. But the fact that he backs off his Gators commitment, he ends up in Ann Arbor, that's already a good sign. And Michigan needs those types of guys that can be, is he going to be an edge? Is he going to be an interior guy? I mean, he kind of looks more like an edge, but sometimes you can build those guys out a little bit more. Jamar Browder is visiting again this weekend after visiting from Minnesota. For the Minnesota game, rather. He is an NC State commit. I'm not going to go through every name here. The only other one I really kind of want to mention is Donovan Starr. He is the 4-star Auburn cornerback commit. And the reason why I want to mention him is because Georgia just offered him. So that kind of makes you wonder, because it kind of felt like, all right, Auburn, you're going to take Nate Marshall. We're going to take Donovan Starr. It's kind of long felt like that. And now suddenly Michigan's looking like it's going to get Earls. And so I'm kind of writing Donovan Starr off, but at the same time, that just is interesting. But the additional thing about Starr is that he went to the same high school as Junior Colson, Miles Pollard. So there still is a pull to Ann Arbor. I think he's visiting this weekend, so I'll be interested to see how that goes. All right. I want to talk a little bit about the situation as it pertains to the MSU media and its treatment of Kalel Mullings. And we're going to kind of excoriate a bit of just this weird system of victimhood that tends to continually perpetuate out of East Lansing, the fan base, the media, all of that, and the damage that tends to cause in certain ways. So we're going to get to that here in just a moment. But before we do, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same exact page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, so I went back and took a look because I didn't write this yesterday. I was kind of out and about. I drove down to Ohio, of all places, after the press conference. And I already obviously had a show taped and ready to go for yesterday. I went down to get some video equipment, and I saw in the early goings of the day, Sharon Moore was on 97.1 and said that actually looking further into the situation on Saturday after the game, or at the end of the game, rather, because, I mean, this whole thing started while there were still moments on the clock, right? It's an on-field skirmish. Remember, we've made that distinction back in 2022, difference between an on-field skirmish and something that happens post-game, all of that. But he said that upon further review, it appears that Kalel Mullings actually was trying to be a superhero. And I mean, that to me, that might be going a little far, right? Like, that's a little hyperbolic. And, you know, I'm not sure. Maybe, you know, they saw some things of, like, I don't want to say differently, but the obviously they've got different cameras and stuff that they can go to. But the tapes that I saw, it didn't look like what Michigan State people were alleging. But it wasn't like I could watch the same tape and say, like, I know who the star of the show is. You know what I mean? But it does kind of open something up in my eyes. And that is the ridiculousness of the MSU media. And I went back and I was looking at some of the tweets that were put out by some of the people in MSU media. And I'm going to call them out right here. I don't have any qualms about doing that. But like Chris Solari and Graham Couch. Graham Couch wrote an article about, you know, the favored son. The Big Ten has to punish its favored son. And I'm like, you know, sorry, Ohio State, them's the rules, man. You know, Michigan State get in a fight. Ohio State, sorry, you're going to have to get punished. You know, it's going to be 4 more years of Ryan Day. There you go. There's your punishment. But Chris Solari literally tweeted stuff saying Kalel Mullings was stomping on, or, you know, stuff like that. Like, unabashedly stating this player by name was doing this exact thing. And looking at the video, I didn't really see what they saw because you couldn't see, right? Like, the legs are completely obscured, right, by the video that is out there. And I'm not saying that no one was injured, but it is kind of curious that with all of this, MSU didn't send forth any, like, because you could prove that someone, like, the, you know, the rumor is a female staffer is the one he was stomping on, which to me just feels very convenient for their narrative of trying to paint someone as a villain. Kalel Mullings, of all people, who's like, if you were to make me look at the whole breadth of the Michigan team and the players that are within and say which one of these guys is most likely to get in any kind of actual trouble for, like, some kind of physical altercation, Kalel Mullings would be one of the lowest on the list, in my opinion, having known this guy since he was a recruit. Okay. So it already kind of doesn't pass, like, the smell test when it comes to knowing him, right? It's like you can know somebody and understand, like, that person's not going to do that thing. Okay. Like, there's just certain things that are just immutable characteristics of certain people. And I can sit there and say pretty unabashedly that I highly doubt Kalel Mullings is going to start trying to stomp on a female staffer of a rival school because I hate MSU or whatever, you know. But the fact that you had the MSU media so unabashedly, without any kind of, like, here's our victim, like, you could easily just be like Michigan was able to do in the aftermath of what happened in the tunnel. They're able to be like, see, Jaden McBurrows and Jamon Green, this is the issue right here. Like, suffered this, here they are, like, this is what they had done. It's, you know, they're missing time, etc. Like they were able to like put them forth very quickly and very easily. MSU hasn't been able to do that. Yet you have these reporters out here feeding into the victimhood mentality of this rival school that wants so much to be considered the good guy amidst the blue wall and all of this stuff. So much that they're just willing to put out like, okay, this is what we want to have happened essentially, so we're going to do it. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say that Kalel should sue these guys for defamation, but I would imagine there has to be a path there, because if Sharon's accounting is correct, that he actually was trying to help, and you can go through and look and see that there was nothing there. The fact that you had these MSU reporters and feeding into the fan base, really, honestly, they just took a fan narrative and ran with it. The same way that there was like the part of the video just showed Pernell McPhee, like you essentially, as you're zaprootering it, they make it look like, oh, he's hitting this guy. And then people kind of watch it in context and say, well, no, he's not. It looks like he's kind of trying to break things up, right? That's the type of stuff like, okay, don't let them get away with this. I know it'll make their victimhood mentality that much worse. But like at some point, this has to stop. This rivalry isn't fun for this reason, because they just continue to be absolutely absurd about every single thing that Michigan does at every single time, to the point where they take good kids. It would be like me sitting here being like, I absolutely loathe Ohio State, which I'm not exactly a fan of Ohio State, but I can separate the fact that, you know, there are good kids on that team. Right. Like I've talked to Travion Henderson before. You're right. Like and throughout their time, I can sit there and say, like, yeah, that's a good kid. I got to know him through the recruiting process or whatever. To act like, nope, they're all villainous. That's just who they are. Right. Because they don't like Michigan and they play for the team that everybody hates. It's just amazing to me that the MSU media can and does the types of things that they do with so much impunity, to the point where it's like, Graham Couch is saying, oh, after 2018, Michigan smeared human whatever all over the walls. And like, this is the first we're hearing about it. Like, you're telling me that the people who want to act holier than thou, and, you know, what was the thing? Defeat with dignity and all this stuff. And, you know, they're the villains with the blue wall. We're just Mark D'Antonio, where did all the Spartans go? You know, all that stuff. That he kept his mouth shut. And they just did that. That just happened. And we just heard about it 6 years later. I cannot suspend my disbelief that much. So shame on the MSU media for kind of feeding into this victimhood mentality, for impugning people's character without, like, okay, if some video comes out with a different angle that clearly more shows what they allege and disproves what Sharon Moore said about Kalel Mullings, then, you know what, Kalel would deserve all of the backlash that he's gotten from that side of the aisle and more. But the Big Ten looked into it and said we couldn't find anything. Michigan internally looked into it and said we couldn't find anything. MSU just basically alleged like they did this and they had nothing to back it up. And the MSU media just they took the fan theories and amplified them, and then are sitting there and being like, oh, see, we're just such victims. When in actuality, the aggrieved parties are the ones that you were accusing. So get off your low horse and apologize. I'm talking to you, you Spartan media hacks. Okay. All right. We're going to move on. I want to kind of get into this Oregon game. Just a brief moment. What do I think is going to happen? So we'll get to that here in just a moment. Before we do, our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it is a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime. A really fun overtime might be a Rose Bowl one. Anyway, which is why they created Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with a special flavor called Fan Fuel. The energy shot, which is made just for super fans like you and me. The fans who are the first in the parking lot and the last to leave. We see you. So when you think about things like Donovan Edwards and the trick play, throwing it up to Colston Loveland, this fourth ever pass, and it was completed by Donovan Edwards. Colston with his fourth touchdown reception of the season. That's the moment of the week. And the way that I would celebrate that is with a 5-hour energy, because 5-hour energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5-hour energy shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. So what is your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5-hour energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com. Shipped nationwide. It is full on blustery fall outside. Like just heavy winds, all that stuff. I hate it because I hate winter. I got to move to Florida or something because I need some all year sunshine and all year warmth. Even though it's 70 degrees, I can't do it with whatever is going on out here. This is absolutely absurd. All right. Michigan, Oregon, number one team in the country. I see a lot of fans that are like, we can do that. Kind of Rob Schneider and water boying it. Maybe don't turn the ball over. That's the first thing. If you don't turn the ball over and just win the turnover battle, right? I mean, it can't just be like win the turnover battle because it's like, yeah, they threw 3 interceptions, we threw 2. Kind of depends on the part of the field and what happened with those interceptions. If there was points off of said turnovers, all that stuff. But if Michigan's going to have a shot, what it needs to do is obviously turn over Dillonn Gabriel. Okay, so that's number one. But I do want to look very briefly here because he has had some moments where he's put the ball in harm's way. I'm not saying that he's like terrible at it, right? Because Michigan's been very bad at it, right? But he's got 5 interceptions so far on the year. And most of those have come later, right? Like he had 6 touchdowns, no interceptions to start out the season, right? But then UCLA, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Michigan State, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. At Purdue, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Illinois, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. You're probably not going to keep him from throwing the ball kind of all over the yard. His worst game from a yardage standpoint is 243 yards. And that came against Boise State. Otherwise, it's like against Ohio State at 341. Now, you hope you're better than that, right? That's the second best they did all season. Best being against FCS Idaho. But you've got to be able to slow that down. You've got to be able to turn him over. The good news in some ways is the fact that Michigan has been very good against the pass lately. That has been that's extremely encouraging. So we'll see if what they're able to do as far as that's concerned. But against Illinois, I mean, they got over 500 yards of total offense. They threw for 298 and rushed for 229. I don't think you're going to win if you give up either of those numbers, obviously. Okay. But they allowed 7.87 yards per play. So I think the big thing, if you're Michigan, you need to hold them to essentially Boise State numbers. Boise State lost that game 37-34. Boise State might be a better team right now than Michigan, but Michigan is still technically in a lot of ways more talented, certainly up front. Keep in mind, Michigan still does have the number 1 pass rush in the country, according to PFF. So it isn't like Michigan is just incapable here. They can get to Dillonn Gabriel and disrupt him. They just have to find ways to do that. And they have to stall the rushing attack. Like you have to be able to give up less than 250 yards. That's like a minimum, right? I think also it should be noted is like Illinois, it's not like they passed for a ton, but they managed to still double up basically the passing number they had the week before while still getting kind of the same rushing numbers, well, outside of the special teams play that they got. So Michigan defensively still kind of was able to do to Illinois a little bit better than what Oregon was able to do. So it just by transitive property, which is never works, it just tells you that, okay, Michigan might still have a pretty good defense. They got to get off the field on third downs. I mean, that goes without saying, right? The fact that they hadn't been doing that, especially third and long, you just have to make good on some of those things, and you have to sustain some drives. I mean, that said, when I make my final prediction tomorrow, it's certainly going to be an Oregon win in my prediction. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a path. Now, Michigan's playing with a little confidence. Maybe they can kind of string things together if you start just running out some trick plays, like have 4 or 5 like the Detroit Lions tend to do. Like, just get creative with it, roll it out at the right time, get into the ebb and flow. Like, it's going to take all the creativity in the world. This is the number 1 team in the country coming in, so you can't look at this in the way that sometimes Michigan likes to look at things and say, like, well, they're going to do what they do and we're going to do what we do. Nope, can't do that this game. That's fine when you've got the talent at quarterback and across the board like you had with J.J. McCarthy. It is not going to work when you're unranked hosting the number 1 team in the country. So get creative, get off the field when you can. They're going to get you sometimes. They're going to put up points. Limit them to 24 points or under and find a way to get above that when it comes to scoring. Might take a pick 6, and we'll see how healthy Michigan is because it doesn't really feel like they're very healthy right now. All right, that's going to do it for us today. I haven't talked to Trente since Saturday, so I don't know if we're doing a show tomorrow or not. Hopefully that is the plan, but otherwise it will be a preview, full-on, full-throated preview of the Oregon game. But thank you for watching today, and thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again soon. Peace.